Most people believe mermaids are nothing more than ancient fairy tales and ocean myths, but very few know that official history recorded a moment when a world-famous explorer documented seeing one alive. In December of 1497, off East Africa, Captain Vasco da Gama wrote an official entry in his ship logbook detailing an encounter with a strange pale creature in the dark ocean. Today we unearth the true historical records to reveal what really surfaced beside his wooden ship 500 years ago, and why the scientific reality behind the legend is stranger than any myth. His crew watched something emerge vertically out of heavy ocean swells, holding a small living form against its chest, with long dark hair, tangled across skin that gleamed like marble under the moonlight. The captain Vasco da Gama leaned over the wooden railing and ordered his ship doctor to record every detail of the creature they had just encountered in the uncharted waters of the sea. His official logbooks recorded a mermaid, a half-human being, that lived beneath the waves, a creature that sailors had whispered about for centuries in taverns across all the Mediterranean and Atlantic coasts. For 500 years, historians dismissed these entries as the desperate, fevered hallucinations of men dying from scurvy in isolation after months navigating uncharted water that no European vessel had ever touched before. But the logs were not a fantasy, and the crew was not insane, because what Vasco da Gama saw that night was real, and it still haunts those same dark coastal waters today. The voyage had begun 5 months earlier, when 4 ships departed Lisbon to find a sea route to India, carrying 170 men into the terrifying unknown of the open Atlantic Ocean. By the time they rounded the Cape of Good Hope, the fleet entered waters so remote that no European map possessed a single outline of the coastlines or currents waiting ahead of them. The crew was starving, exhausted, and terrified, while the ocean around them turned violent with rogue waves that smashed against timber hulls and snapped heavy hemp rigging under the weight of relentless gales. Scurvy had settled into the lower decks, causing gums to rot and old wounds to reopen, while men watched their companions collapse under a disease that science could not yet explain or cure. In the middle of this nightmare, as the fleet drifted off Mozambique, the ocean suddenly fell dead calm under a heavy fog that erased the horizon and trapped the ships in absolute silence. That was when the water began to move beside the flagship, and a pale shape broke the surface, standing upright in the Black Sea, like a human body rising up from a grave. The creature had broad shoulders and arms that tapered into flat flippers, while 2 distinct breasts were visible above the waterline as it cradled a small calf against its side in the dark. It stared back at the ship with dark, unblinking eyes, while cold ocean water streamed off thick kelp that draped across its head like long matted hair, drifting over its heavy, curved back. Vasco da Gama was not the only explorer to write down a detailed encounter with these creatures during the golden age of maritime discovery, as ships pushed much deeper into unexplored tropical oceans. 5 years earlier, off the coast of the Dominican Republic, Christopher Columbus logged, seeing 3 mermaids rising high out of the sea, although he noted they were not as beautiful as legends claimed. Henry Hudson recorded a similar sighting in the Arctic Ocean, when his crew watched a woman with long black hair and a fishtail flip backward into the icy water beside their vessel. For centuries, science assumed these hardened sea captains were simply lying to sell books, or that their exhausted crews were hallucinating after months of drinking stale water and eating rotten hardtack at sea. The truth turned out to be far stranger than fiction, because the mermaids of the Age of Discovery were not mythical maidens or imaginary monsters created by desperate, lonely sailors in the dark. They were looking at the Dugong, a massive living marine mammal that has inhabited the warm coastal waters of the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea for more than 50 million evolutionary years. Dugongs are the only strictly herbivorous marine mammals living on Earth today, feeding on underwater seagrass meadows in shallow coastal bays where freshwater rivers spill out into open ocean currents along tropical shores. Because they are mammals, they must surface every few minutes to breathe air through nostrils located on the top of their snout, producing a distinct exhaling gasp that echoes loudly across calm water. Female dugongs possess 2 large mammary glands located directly under their pectoral flippers, strikingly similar in position and anatomy to human breasts, used to nurse their newborn young calves in open seawater. When nursing, a mother dugong often cradles her calf above the surface, using one flipper, while leaning her upper body far out of the sea to to protect the newborn from predators lurking below. To a sailor watching from a high ship deck at twilight through fog and sea spray, a mother dugong holding her calf vertically looks unnervingly like a living human woman holding her child. The long hair described in historic logbooks was actually dense strands of floating marine seagrass and thick kelp that frequently become tangled over the animal's head as it feeds on shallow ocean floors. Their faces are covered in short, coarse, sensory bristles, while their thick gray skin is heavily scarred from encounters with hungry sharks and territory battles, creating a weathered, human-like appearance in low light. When threatened or curious, a dugong can rise straight up out of the water, using its powerful dolphin-like tail to balance itself in the current, while inspecting large ships passing through its territory. The legend of the mermaid was born not from magic, but from the wide gap between human imagination and the bizarre reality of the natural world before modern marine biology explained the deep. Vasco da Gama did not find a sea monster off the African coast. He found an ancient mammal that ruled those warm tropical waters millions of years before humans built their first boats. Yet knowing the scientific truth does not make those historic encounters any less terrifying or deeply atmospheric. You imagine being on a wooden ship 500 years ago, in pitch-black water. Imagine standing on a creaking deck thousands of miles from home, watching a strange breathing creature with breasts and long kelp hair stare back at you from the dark and empty Indian Ocean. Today, the dugong is quietly disappearing from our planet as heavy coastal development, pollution, and destructive boat strikes destroy the ancient seagrass meadows they have relied on since prehistoric times across the globe. Fewer than a few thousand remain in the wild, making a sighting in the waters off Mozambique, almost as rare today as when the Portuguese fleet first anchored there in 1497.